I want to talk a little bit about the band book, so that we make sure that we get that. It's hard when you have a person who's written a lot of things to dwell, too much on one thing and not have enough room for another. And so when I saw you last night here at the Fletcher Library here in Burlington give your talk about the band, you had everyone spellbound. You had them spellbound as you spun this story about this kind of musicians that we have known throughout our young lives, because they're very influential, and yet there was so much more to the story because it really goes back to Dylan going electric.
Well, in the book, I bring it back a lot further than that. Mm-hmm. Because the big historical impact of Dylan hooking up with the band, who at first were called the Hawks when they first got together, that was a very culturally groundbreaking moment. But you need to backtrack it as to what was Dylan going through up until that point. He came together with the band after he made the decision to play electric at Newport, and everybody had booed him. But as I show in the book, the problem wasn't as much that he was switching his guitars as much as he was switching from being part of a long stream that went back to the IWW and Joe Hill, and using songs to bring people together against a tyrannical system. That is where Dylan had originally slipped into. The IWW, to the Almanac Singers, to the Weavers, to the Kingston Trio and Peter, Paul and Mary, to the Civil Rights Movement, doing the same thing, using songs that people knew, but adapting them with words that meant something for the moment. Now, so I had to bring it way back. The other thing, on the other side, the band, the guys who became the band, did not come from a folk background. They didn't come out of that congregational singing thing. They were coming out of the blues and R&B and rockabilly up in Canada with Ronnie Hawkins. So you have to understand that there's two different streams coming, and the important thing is when those two streams came together. That is where history was made. But you have to understand that these were traditions that were has long been going on. There are two streams of music, or two approaches to music. One is that it's the brand new, the latest, it's the greatest, it's the most sensational. And that's okay. There's a lot of really good formulaic pop tunes that we respect and love. And then there's this other whole spectrum where people realize that they're not reinventing the wheel. They are part of this stream that goes back through tradition and has continued to grow and evolve, but they are part of this stream. Some people call that stream folk music. Some people nowadays call that same stream Americana. I think of the Big Bill Broonzy story when he was on the Studs Terkel radio show, and Big Bill had played a song, and Studs turned to him and said, "Was that a folk song, Bill?" And Big Bill Broonzy didn't waste a beat. He just said, "Well, I ain't never heard a horse singing it." That is what it's about. This stream that's continued to be very strong. And that's the message that I was trying to bring in the book.
And you're going. The other thing that was interesting about this book that you were talking about was the makeup of the band was very different as far as where their environments came from. From Robbie Robinson coming from, you were saying from the slums up in Canada, and the rest of the band more kind of country.
They were farm boys. They grew up on farms.
And can you talk, I thought that was pretty fascinating of what you felt about that and how it made Robbie Robinson a little bit different. Yeah.
We were talking about that it's a matter of perspective. Mm-hmm. Before I get into that, let me just point out to people that may not know. I was on a radio show last week. And the announcer, the talk show host, said near the end, tell me that they all did so well, that they're laying on the beach, sipping their martinis, and smoking whatever they smoke. and the truth is not like that. One guy in the band made a ton of money because he was a smart businessman. The other guys constantly were declaring bankruptcy. And it's a matter of perspective. You have 4 guys who grew up on farms. Now, my experience of being in the country or being with country people is what you do at night is everybody gets together and you play music. You take turns. And you're playing music just because the love of music is just such a joy. It's not a business. You're playing it out of the passion for the joy. Now, Robbie, not only did he grow up in the slums or cabbage town of Toronto, but his dad was a gangster. And not a very good gangster. Robbie was still in diapers when his father was shot to death. So he grew up with that. Robbie actually grew up in 2 different places. He spent a lot of time with his mother's people. His mother is Mohawk Indian from the 6 Nations Reserve in Ontario. On school vacations, they'd go and spend the time with family. And that's where Robbie learned how to play guitar. His uncles and his cousins played country songs around the fire. And he grew up saying, that's what I want to do when I grow up. But most of the time, he was in Cabbage Town, the slums. Now, you think about that, and you've got 4 guys who grew up on the farms playing music for the love of it, and 1 guy who's playing music because he needs to pick himself by the bootstraps and pull himself out of the slums. You don't have the luxury of playing for joy. You have to make it into a business. So you have these 2 elements going on, and ultimately they clashed. And that's the story of the band, how those elements clashed and blew apart. Something that, in the beginning, the precious part of the band is that they played and worked as a unit. Every one of the 5 had every you can't dissect any of those songs on the first 2 albums where it isn't all 5 contributing to it. And that's wound up being big problems, which we could spend hours talking about. And I hope that people that are interested in finding out pick up the book.
Yeah, well, I think that's the thing is we have some information for your website that we can put on the screen, and you will then be able to go, to Craig Harris's website, and you can find out more about his drumming. You can find out more about the different books that he's written, about his insight into life, and this book in particular, it's called The Band, Pioneers of Americana Music. And it really is an interesting read. So you go to the website and try to find that out, and be on the lookout for this next book that's going to come out about the Native American music. And what's going to be the title of that again?
The Heartbeat, Warble, and Electric Powwow the magnificence of Native America's music. And that's where it's groundbreaking, because traditionally, Native Americans have either been treated by academics or by people who bemoan that they're gone, but it's a very rich, vibrant culture.
Well, Craig Harris, thank you so much for being on the Songwriter's Notebook. Why don't you play a little bit of your drums as we go out?